with his straight trunk and shiny green needles all over his branches, but he was very unhappy. Oh, he sighed, if only I looked different. All the other trees in the forest have such pretty soft leaves that dance in the wind, and my needles are so straight and stiff that they can't move at all. And they're so prickly, nobody comes near me. But, as it costs nothing to wish, I might as well wish for leaves. Prettier leaves than those on the other trees. Gold leaves. Ah, yes. How I would like to have leaves of gold. And with these words, the little pine tree fell asleep. This is where you play the actual pine tree song. Ready? Here we go. Wishes I made for leaves of pale gold, but needles are better for fighting the cold. In the morning, the tree felt very strange when he tried to stretch his limbs as he always did upon waking up. And when he opened his eyes, he just shut them again quickly, for there was such a glare and glimmer. When he finally was able to keep his eyes open, he found that every single one of his branches was covered with leaves of pure gold. He was so happy. He said to himself, now I am more beautiful than any other tree in the forest. None of them, poor things, has such beautiful leaves. And with that, he drew himself up as tall as he could and bent and turned his limbs so that the sunlight blazed and glittered on his leaves of gold. It was almost evening when robbers with large sacks over their shoulders wandered into the forest. The tree with its shining golden leaves stood out from all the other trees. The robbers came up to the tree, and when they examined the leaves, their joy knew no bounds. The leaves were pure gold. Every one of the leaves was instantly stuffed into the robbers' bags. And with that, the robbers threw their sacks over their shoulders, and they left as quietly as they had come. Improvise. Here we go. The pine tree shook and trembled, partly in fear and partly from the chill of the night air. Oh dear, what will I do now? I'm uglier than ever. I'll never ask for gold leaves again because men will always rob me of them. If only I could have leaves of glass. And with these words, the little pine tree fell asleep. 1, 2, 3. Wishes I made for leaves of pale gold, but needles are better for fighting the cold. The next morning, the tree was awakened by a wonderfully soft, ringing, tinkling sound. He looked to see where the strange music was coming from, and to his surprise found that he himself was the source of beautiful music. His branches were covered with the most delicate leaves of glass, and the sun made them sparkle with all the colors of the rainbow. He was really a marvelous sight. Look at me, the little pine tree shouted. I'm more beautiful than all the other trees. I can make finer music than any of the birds. He shook his branches so gently that the leaves shone delicate prisms while producing the sweetest music he ever heard in the forest. This is where my storm starts to improvise. Starting quiet and getting louder. Are you ready? Go ahead. But it was not long before the sun disappeared behind big black clouds. Too, Amber, you can improvise too. It was howling and growling, and wind whirled and whistled around the pine tree. The wind blew fiercely through the little tree's branches and shook them without mercy. Stop it! Stop it! Cried the tree. Can't you see you're breaking my precious leaves? But the wind did not listen, and it blew harder than ever. The delicate leaves smashed against each other and fell to the ground in 1,000 broken pieces. The little pine tree was very sad and unhappy when he looked at his ugly bare branches. He thought to himself, but of course, how could I have been so thoughtless as to wish for glass leaves? I think now that if I could have leaves like all the other trees, I should be content. And with these words, the little pine tree fell asleep. 1, 2, 3. Wishes I made for leaves of real gold, but needles are better for fighting the cold. When the little pine tree awoke in the morning, his limbs felt soft and light, and they seemed to dance in the morning breeze. He looked at himself, and lo and behold, he was covered with soft green leaves that rustled and danced on his branches. Now I shall be satisfied. Towards evening, a family of deer came along in search for a good supper. They soon saw the tree with his young, tender leaves. The deer immediately began to nibble on the leaves and found them to be very tasty and juicy indeed. The deer settled down for a good meal, and since the tree was small, they could reach even to the very top with their long necks. In a short time, they had eaten up all of the leaves, and the pine tree once again stood bare. He was so embarrassed and unhappy that he didn't dare to look up. Why was I not satisfied with my needles? If only I could have my needles back again. And it was a very long time before he fell asleep that night. The little tree was very fortunate, for when he woke the next morning, he found that his own slender, fragrant needles had once more been given to him. Fall came, and all the other trees lost their leaves, but the little pine tree stood alone in the forest. He was the only green tree left for miles around. Later that winter, a group of children out for a hike spotted the tree. And it was the most beautiful tree they had ever seen. So they decided to decorate it with bits of tinsel to make it shine and add pieces of fruit for the animals to eat. Between constant visits from the animals who feasted on the fruit and the children who regularly came to dance and play around the tree, the little pine tree grew to be very old, very tall, and very happy. You guys can stay out there if you want and dance around the tree for this last part. All right, all together in Do pentatonic. We're going to do this song. Ready? Here we go.